Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We are in the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 39, verses 21 through 29. Now, in chapters 38 and most of 39, the Lord wins a complete victory over Gog and his army of evil, right? And this is a complete victory over the most atrocious really of human activity, which is war, the complete destruction of people and civilizations. And it's so much so that the birds and the animals feast on the horses and chariots, the mighty men and all the soldiers, right? That's what it says in the text. And so at the end of this victory, the Lord says, I will display my glory. And this massive victory fully discloses the Lord's power and judgment. There's no longer any denying or ignoring that the Lord is Lord, that he is sovereign over everything. He took down Gog and his army of evil. And this is no longer about faith or choice. You don't get to choose God. This is about obedience. It is the undisputed victor. And so there's only surrender. And he says in verse 22 that the covenant community will see, which means that they too will gain a deeper recognition that God is sovereign, that he is Lord over all, sovereign over them. And they're going to see who God really is and what they owe to God. I think about when we look at the cross and the resurrection, we see that God is powerful over every enemy we have and what we owe to God, who died on the cross and was raised from the dead for us. So it clarifies also what God did previously. He says the nations will know that, it wasn't Babylon or someone else who did this to Israel. I did it. I sent them into exile for their idolatry, for their sin, and I hid my face from them, as it says in verses 23 and 24. And we think about how the withdrawal of God's favor from his people means that many evils and troubles are going to come upon them because they don't have God's protection. And this was a common phrase for divine disfavor, right? I hid my face. The opposite of that is the blessing we have out of the book of Numbers, that we hear every time in worship. The Lord look upon you with favor, right? And so the Lord says, I handed them over to their enemies and over to the sword. The problems that Israel, God's people, faced was because they failed, not God. They were unclean and defiled and offensive. Verse 25, therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. So God is preaching his word now, not just in the future. He says, now, in this time, I will restore my people. I'm going to reverse all the consequences of sin, and I'm going to have compassion on all the covenant people. Now, this word compassion, it's the first time it's used in Ezekiel. And he says, I'm going to be jealous or zealous, but either one, for my name, which means God is going to be passionate to assert who he is, his rep, his character. God's going to be eager to be God. And he says they will forget their shame and all their unfaithfulness, all the horrible things they did. And forgetting our shame and disgrace takes an act of God. And he says, when I bring them back, when I gather them from the other nations, I'll be proved holy because I made my people whole again. I made them sacred. And so he says, I took them into exile among the nations. I did that. I collected them back into my land. Again, this is the Lord doing this. And I will no longer leave any of them behind. I won't leave anyone behind. The Lord does that through his grace. And so I will no longer hide my face from them. Their spiritual barrenness is over. They're going to enjoy full enjoyment of the fellowship with the Lord. And he says, I'm going to pour out my spirit, the lavishness of God's presence for internal regeneration and bestowal of new life on those who are spiritually dead. Hey, thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.